every day. On the phone, it's a pleasure to welcome to the program English professor at Wayne State University and author of Keywords, The New Language of Capitalism, John Patrick Leary. John, welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks for inviting me.
So this is, I really enjoy this book and these type of approaches to sort of making us more conscious of the way that we speak and what the implications are. But before we sort of dig into some of the words here and that you examine in the book, let's just start with the way that you define, because these are words that have been, I guess, I'm not sure how to phrase this, brought to us by late stage capitalism. But what does late stage capitalism mean to you?
And you're starting with the tough ones right off the bat. Huh? Well, basically it means the latest form of capitalism. I think that's the best and most concise definition that I know, which is to say, on the one hand, it is characterized by a lot of by a particular vocabulary of rebellion, of artistry, of individualism, of individual possibility through the market. And so that is what gives rise to something as peculiar in historical context as like the creative capitalism or the creative class. But on the other hand, it also implies that this is merely a new twist on something very old. And so that's one of the points that I like to really emphasize about this book is that our current economic vocabulary is really big on constantly celebrating novelty, constantly celebrating innovation and so forth. And the point is that a lot of what passes for novelty in our world is just slightly different forms of the old forms of exploitation. And so it's the latest form of something old. It's a new twist on an old story.
It's interesting you say that, because I think, Corey Robin's definition of reactionaryism is very similar to that. The idea that you're sort of repackaging and maybe not so much in terms of capitalism per se, but you're repackaging the sort of pre-existing and the long time existing power dynamics and making them cool and seem rebellious in some fashion.
Yeah, and a lot of in the story I'm kind of telling in some of these words, and innovation is a particularly good example. They come about sometimes in deliberate ways, sometimes sort of organically, but as ways of responding to old critiques of capitalism. So in the Depression in the 1930s and 40s, and then in the post-war period, the idea of big business was something really toxic in American culture. Big business was seen as with great suspicion, and the life of a businessman was seen as a kind of life of conformity. This is like the organization man idea, and so innovation becomes a way of sort of celebrating the idea of personal liberation and personal fulfillment through trudging off to the office every day. And that's a kind of phenomenon that I think is that is very much with us now, but its origins are about half a century ago.
Is that and I want to get into some of the specifics of the words again, but staying sort of like just a little bit 10,000 feet. Is there can you organize the development of these words, or I guess like the not so much the development, but the adoption and the frequency of use of these words? Are there different ways? Are there main categories of the ways in which these happen? Are they, for instance, are they to serve in the same function that you were just talking about? Like, for instance, I just got back from a trial lawyer conference, and they don't necessarily call themselves trial lawyers anymore because trial lawyers got maligned. So they refer to themselves sometimes as plaintiff attorneys. And And so we see this, development happen when, like you say, there's a perspective that, being part of a big business is seen as being ossified. So we come up with the word innovation. Is that the way that these words enter into the lexicon, or are there other roots as well?
Well, I'd say that's most of them function in kind of that way. They don't always have a particular author, or there's not necessarily one guy who thought of saying innovation all the time. But they do function in a way to as substitutes or as evasions for what we're really talking about. So one of the best examples is human capital, which I talk about in the book, which is really just a way of saying labor talking about without using that dirty word if you're an economist. And so it's a way of talking about something that might be characterized by exploitation or mistreatment as being a resource, and not just as a resource, but as a resource for your own self. Your work is your own human capital. You're not beholden to a boss in that kind of imagination. So it's a way of talking about work without talking about inequality or exploitation at work.
All right, so let's talk.